Hmm. All right. All right. So could you give an example of a film which is, not great, but it's perfect? Like a movie that you can.
Um, let's see. Let me think. A good filmmaker to use as an example would be Federico Fellini, the Italian filmmaker. I think
Hmm.
if you were to ask me what's the greatest film that I've ever seen, I would say that it was his La Dolce Vita because it works
Yeah.
as a comedy, it works as a drama, it has a musical scene that works, the acting is
Yeah.
superb. Even the worst actress, Britt Eklund, the boobalicious blonde, works
Hmm.
because her character is supposed to be a dumb, vapid blonde. On the
Yeah.
other hand, he has some other films like La Strada, which
Yeah.
has his wife and it has Anthony Quinn in it, and that has
Hmm.
moments of greatness here and there. And you could make an argument it's a great film, but it also
Hmm.
has some really mawkish, sentimental stuff in it,
Yeah.
and so that's not a perfect film by any stretch of the imagination. But you can make a good argument that it's a perfect film. A great
Hmm.
film, rather, not a perfect film, a great film. So greatness and
Hmm.
perfection are different. I would say, though, La Dolce Vita is as close to being a perfect and a great film as there is, even more so than something like 2001, which does a lot
Hmm.
of things that were never done before and still haven't been
Hmm.
equaled 50 years on. But
Hmm.
I can think of no other film where I can't really find a flaw in that.
Hmm. Oh, yeah, that's a great opinion. I have one of my own regarding 2001.
Go ahead.
There was when I studied script writing in Canada. I went to Ottawa, the
Uh-huh.
capital, and so there was a debate on Citizen Kane versus 2001: A Space Odyssey. And which film do you think among these two is greater? And
2001.
yeah, I
2001,
mean,
my opinion.
yes, yes, my opinion also 2001. The reason I said is although Citizen Kane is fantastic from a technical perspective and even the whole underlying theme, like the
Yeah.
rosebud and how we all crave for our childhood. But 2001 encompasses something much, much more, right? It encompasses time and space and the entire history of mankind, right?
Yeah.
So maybe a film should be judged on those two criteria, like technical elements and the overall theme.
Well, here's the thing. You can't be so rigid that you get rooted into something. What works? Let me give you an example. You've probably seen on my website that I used to run something called the Uptown Poetry Group, where I had a group of
Yeah,
poets that came together. What I
yeah,
tried never to do was in my criticism, I never tried to Schneiderize a poem, meaning I never tried to
mm,
write a poem from the way I would write it. I would read a poem and say, okay, this is what I see. Here's how you can make it a better poem objectively. What do you want
mm,
to do? So then I would say,
mm,
okay, you do these five things. This will do that. That'll do this. You'll get, and I'd explain that. But if the person didn't want that, and
mm,
they had to say write about the death of their Aunt Mary, I'd say,
mm,
well, then focus this way. As a critic,
mm,
you also have to be aware that you can't impose your own standards. If I'm, say, a liberal leaning political person, or let's say if I
mm,
were a religious Christian or something,
mm,
and I
mm,
wanted to see a film, and let's say I saw a film about two lesbians, I'm like, oh my God, I don't like lesbianism. Well, I can't
mm.
bring that as a legitimate criticism to the film if it's
Yeah,
about lesbians. You know,
yeah,
that
yeah.
my opinion there doesn't matter, and it would fundamentally ruin my credibility to say, oh, I don't approve of lesbianism because I'm a fundamentalist Christian and this has lesbians, therefore it's a bad film. No, it may
Mm,
indeed be a bad film because it's politically correct. It may be indeed a
mm,
bad film because the acting is terrible or the writing is terrible.
mm,
But I
mm,
have to say it's a bad film because of this, not because of what it's trying to do. There's a famous
mm.
film here in the U.S. called Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer.
Yeah, I've seen.
It's not a particularly good film. It's not a terrible film, but it's not a good film. It's utterly mediocre, and
Mm,
it's mediocre because the acting is mediocre. There's a few interesting shots. There's a couple of little things about the character that suggest that
mm,
it could have been something better and more. But I
mm.
can't say that it's a terrible film simply because it's glorifying, in a sense, the
Yeah,
serial killer's life.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I'm gonna get back to you on that, the whole moral issue, the question of morality.
Uh-huh.